Straight Shift with the Car Chick, the podcast that's all about cars, buying, selling, fixing, and driving, and sometimes running fast if you're the car chick. Now, here she is.
Welcome to the Straight Shift. I hope everybody is having a good summer and is doing their best to stay cool out there. Today we're going to talk about gas. I'm not talking about the kind you get from Taco Tuesday, but the kind that is the lifeblood of the American economy. And let's face it, without gasoline, the world as we know it would pretty much come to a screeching halt, and we would find ourselves living in a Mad Max movie. So I wanted to talk about this topic today because I met someone last week at a networking event, and of course we got to talking about cars, and this person mentioned that he had been putting just regular gas into his Lexus, which I happen to know requires premium gas. So we kind of started talking about that, and I realized that a lot of people don't necessarily know what the different octane levels really mean in gas and why it is so critically important to put the right kind of gas into your vehicle. There's a lot of misinformation out there and a lot of information that is just a little out of date given the engine technology and the changes in gasoline and how they put that together, how they refine it, that have changed over the years, that some of the things we used to think really aren't necessarily true anymore. So as usual, on the Straight Shift, I'm going to give it to you straight, and let's see if we can't dispel some of those myths and make sure that you understand why it is so important to put the right type of gasoline into your car, because this is all about saving you money. Y'all know how much I love to save you money. So without getting too terribly technical, let's talk about what gasoline really is. It is obviously one of the byproducts of petroleum, and it was first harvested back in the mid-1800s by a guy named Edwin Drake. He was actually after another petroleum byproduct, which is kerosene, which was used in lamps. And back in the 1850s, that's what they had. They didn't have the magic electricity that we have today, so kerosene was really, really important to them, and gasoline was actually considered completely useless. They would either just discard the gasoline byproduct when they were making kerosene, or they sold it as a treatment for head lice, which is just a really, really scary thought. So, nowadays everything has changed, and when they make gasoline, what they do is they heat the petroleum and they catch the vapors as a gas, and then it cools back down into a liquid, and poof, that's gasoline. Very, very simplified, but that's the quick answer. So what's the difference between 87 octane, 93 octane, which is premium, that one in the middle that can vary from 89 to 91? What does that mean? Well, the octane rating that's set during the refining process. And fewer gallons of the higher octane fuels, like your premium, your 93 octane, less of that can be created out of one barrel of crude oil. Therefore, because you can get less of it, it costs more. That's why premium gas is more expensive than the regular gas. It's not just because they call it premium and can charge more. There's actually a supply and demand reason for why it is more expensive. So what does the octane rating mean? And again, without getting into the math and the really technical nitty-gritty details, which quite frankly are boring, octane is the measure of a fuel's ability to resist combusting on its own when it's inside the engine. So this means we need to talk for a minute about how engines actually work. Inside your engine, and this is a gasoline engine. After the break, I'm going to talk a little bit about diesel and how that's different. Right now, we're talking about normal gasoline engines. So inside your engine, you have cylinders, and in each cylinder, depending on whether you have a 4-cylinder or a 6-cylinder or an 8-cylinder engine, inside each cylinder is a piston. You can think of a piston as kind of a little fist, and it moves up and down inside that cylinder. And the purpose of that is to convert the chemical energy that's in the fuel into mechanical energy. That's what makes your car move down the road. And each piston, it moves up and down. It makes a total of 4 strokes. So it makes that up-down motion twice for a total of up, down, up, down. That's why these engines are called a 4-stroke engine as opposed to 2-stroke engines like your lawnmower. Now, the first stroke, when the piston pulls down, that's called the intake stroke. And what it's doing is it's pulling air and fuel into that combustion chamber. You have to have both fuel and air in order to create a boom. So anybody who's ever, been into watching pyrotechnics and explosive things, or even just know when you're lighting a match, if you don't have oxygen, that flame is not going to survive. Same thing inside your engine. That's why you have to have that perfect air-fuel mixture to get the power that you need. So on the intake, we're pulling in air and fuel. And then the next is compression. So when that piston, that fist, moves back up, it's compressing that air. And when you compress air and fuel like that, it heats up. And it's going to want to combust, go kablooey on its own, but we don't want it to. We want it to wait until the car's computer decides, hey, this is the perfect time to set off that explosion, and it triggers your spark plug. And your spark plug is basically a lighter, and it sends that little arc that ignites that air-fuel mixture. And that resulting explosion, the kaboom, forces that piston back down, and that's your third stroke or your power stroke. That is what makes that magical thing we know as horsepower. And then the final stroke of the piston pushing back up, it's pushing out all of the exhaust fumes, the leftovers. You can kind of think of it as the farting phase of the 4-stroke engine. It's pushing all the waste gases out. So that is how that works. And so your octane rating tells you just how much that air-fuel mixture can be compressed before it's going to spontaneously ignite. The higher the octane rating, the more compression it can handle, the longer it waits before it would go kablooey on its own. If it goes kablooey on its own before the spark plug ignites it on purpose, that's called an engine knock. You're basically getting 2 explosions now inside that compression chamber. The one that it did it on its own before it was supposed to, kind of a premature combustion, and then the one from the spark plug that's igniting anything that's left over. That's what's called engine knock. And that is a bad thing. We don't want that because 2 explosions instead of just 1 adds more wear and tear, and it can actually damage your engine over time. This is why if you put 87 octane, the cheaper regular grade gas, if you put that fuel into an engine that's designed to have premium fuel, the engine that has designed for premium fuel, that spark plug is going to wait longer before it ignites the air-fuel mixture because it's waiting to get more compression. The more compression you can get before the kaboom, the better kaboom you're going to get, meaning you're going to get more power. So this is why most of your more higher performance engines require premium gas. And in newer cars, really in just the last few years, the engines, even though you don't think about it being a high performance engine, a high performance engine doesn't necessarily mean that it's a sports car, a Porsche or whatever. But because the manufacturers are using so much turbocharged technology, and we're seeing a lot more turbocharged 4-cylinder engines as opposed to just naturally aspirated 6 cylinders or V8s, because they're more fuel efficient, but you can still get more power out of a smaller engine. So you get power and fuel efficiency, which is, kind of automotive nirvana. So a lot of your engines now that are coming out are considered high performance engines in the way they're engineered. So, the little 4-cylinder engine that you buy, it might require premium gas. And you need to look in your owner's manual if you get a new car, even if it's a new used car. One of the most important things you have to do is figure out what is the right type of gas to go in there. Because when the manufacturer says you need to put 93 octane in this car, they're not kidding. Because if you put 87 in it, then you're going to get that knock. You're going to get the 2 explosions because that 87 octane is not going to be able to hold out for the full compression and wait for that spark plug to say go, boom. It's going to just kind of go on its own. So if you have a car that requires premium gas, put premium gas in it if you don't want to damage your engine. Now, engines have what's called a knock sensor nowadays, and so the computer can tell if there's knocking going on, and it can make certain adjustments to account for that, but you can't rely on that. It's still going to damage your engine over time. It's just the car is, kind of going into self-defense mode and doing everything it can to compensate for the fact that you fed it McDonald's when it really wanted a nice kale salad. So put the right fuel in your car, even if you're not going to put the right fuel in your body. Now let's look at the opposite of that. If you have a car that the manufacturer says, hey, this engine is designed for regular old gas, 87 octane, save your money. They mean that as well. And a lot of people think that, oh, well, if I put premium gas in it, I'm going to get more power out of it, or I'll get more fuel efficiency, or my engine will last longer. No, just no. All you're doing is wasting money, because that premium gas, it can hold out for so long on that compression that, the spark plug is still going to ignite it where the 87 octane wanted to ignite. So, you're putting this high, compression, high performance gasoline into an engine that can't do anything with it. It can't use that extra performance and compression that fuel could do in the right kind of engine. So you're just throwing money away. So if your engine requires regular fuel, just put regular fuel in it. It will be fine. It will be perfectly happy. The fuels these days, they all contain all the cleaners and, everything else to kind of keep your engine clean and running well. Just put the regular fuel in it and save your money. You're just wasting money otherwise. So that leaves us with that mid-grade fuel, which can range anywhere from kind of 89 to 91 octane, depending on the gas station and the state that you're in and what their rules are. But is there really a point to the mid-grade? Why is that even there? Well, to know why it's there, we kind of need to look back at history. Back in the day, and those of you who are my age or older will remember that we used to have leaded gas. Scary thought, I know, but we did. And the pumps had regular leaded and premium leaded. And when we started using unleaded fuels, they added another pump to the stations, and you had your, regular leaded, regular unleaded, and then your premium unleaded. And as we phased out leaded fuels entirely, they still had 3 pumps at the gas station. So they created a mid-grade, a kind of middle octane. And there's a couple different theories on why that is. There were some engines back in the 90s, if I recall, kind of the 3 Series BMWs in the mid-90s dictated 89 octane or higher. So those engines were designed, they were more high-performance engines, but they were thinking, okay, this is an entry-level BMW, therefore we also want to keep it as economical as possible. And they optimized that engine for 89 octane so that you were still getting a little more performance out of that BMW motor, but you weren't paying the higher sticker price of the premium fuel. And they also thought from a marketing standpoint, well, people are looking at the pump and they're seeing the regular unleaded at this price, and then there's a 40-cent jump to the next gas price. Ooh, that's a little too much. People might get sticker shock off that. So let's slide one there in the middle that makes it a 20-cent jump, and that people feel more comfortable seeing 20 cents and then another 20 cents. It still added up to a 40% jump, but because of the psychology, it was different in people's heads. So that's kind of another reason that they did it. But there were some engines that were designed to run on it, and some older engines from back in the 80s and 90s. And especially if you lived in higher altitude areas, they did run better on that mid-grade. There were reasons to do it back then. Is there a reason for that mid-grade fuel today? No, not really. Unless you're still driving a car from the 90s, which, I do have one that is, but it's really getting phased out. And as more and more engines are starting to require the premium fuels, there's actually a push within parts of the automotive industry to eliminate regular gas entirely and only have premium gas. That's the only thing that would be available. I think it's going to be a while before we see that happening, but there are people in the industry that are pushing for that. So I don't know of any new cars on the market today that require it, but that's not a piece of information that I'm going to have readily available. So if you happen to have a newer car and the owner's manual says it requires 89 octane, leave me a message. Let me know. I'd be curious to know what cars are out there, if any, that do require that mid-grade fuel. But pretty much mid-grade gas has become totally useless. So look in your owner's manual and see what the minimum octane rating is and put that in your car. You're wasting money otherwise. Or if you're putting a lower grade fuel into a car that requires premium, you are damaging your engine over time. So that is the deal with the octane ratings. I'm going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about diesel and how diesel is different and what happens if you put diesel fuel in a regular engine or you put regular fuel in a diesel engine. It's not going to be pretty. We'll be back right after this. Do you hate car shopping? Do you worry about being taken advantage of or about finding the right car at a fair price? Buying a car can be a frustrating and time-consuming experience. But what if you could get a great deal without having to do a ton of research, without having to haggle, and without the fear of buying a lemon? You can. As your personal car shopper, the Car Chick will help you pick the perfect car based on your unique lifestyle, budget, and personality. She'll handle all of the legwork and negotiating for you. All you have to do is sign the papers and take the keys. It's that easy. To learn how the Car Chick can save you time, money, and hassle on your next car purchase, give us a call at 888-575-2138. That's 888-575-2138. Or visit us on the web at thecarchick.com.
Where the rubber meets the road.
Nice to meet you. Love your asphalt.
Hey, nice treads.
It's Straight Shift with the Car Chick.
Welcome back to the Straight Shift. We are talking about gasoline and why it is so important to put the right type of gasoline, either 87 regular octane or 93 premium octane or whatever your owner's manual says is the right gas for your car. It's so important to do that because if you put premium into a car that only needs regular, you're wasting your money. But if you put regular gas into a car that needs premium, you are damaging your engine. And I didn't mention this before the break, but it's really super important. It can void your warranty. If you take your car into the dealership because you've got engine knocking or the check engine light came on and they find out that it's because you've been putting the wrong type of fuel into that car, they will void your warranty faster than you can say petroleum. So that is another reason to be sure you're feeding your car the right fuel. I wanted to talk a little bit about diesel. Not many of us have diesel engines. Diesel is a lot more popular in Europe, where gas is astronomically more expensive than it is here in the United States. We complain so much about gas prices here, but just take a look at the gas prices over in Europe or in any other part of the world except the Middle East. Gas is really expensive, and diesel gets higher fuel economy, better gas mileage. And in places like Europe, it tends to be cheaper. So that's one of the reasons it's so popular over there, because it is the smarter, economical type of fuel to use. And we do have more diesel vehicles in the US now. You may be part of Volkswagen's buyback program because of their diesel engines. They lied about their emissions stuff to the state of California and got in huge trouble, which is unfortunate because their emissions stuff was actually quite good. I don't really know why they felt they needed to lie about that and screw everything up, but diesels are a lot cleaner than people think. diesels kind of get a bad rap because, you get behind one of those big trucks on the road and, it pulls away at the light and just spews out this dark, nasty smelling smoke out the exhaust. And yeah, that's diesel. That's diesel because diesel does have a lot of particulate emissions, and they're dirty looking, they're stinky. Yet it has fewer of other types of emissions, your greenhouse gases that are really, really bad for the environment. So those are actually worse than the black cloud of stinky smoke. But more and more diesels are getting cleaner and cleaner. They actually call it the clean diesel technology. I was down at the BMW plant in Spartanburg a few years ago where they produce their SUVs, the little X1, the X3, the X5. And I got to drive one of the X5s. They let me drive it sideways down a rock wall. It was really cool. But before I did that, I was driving it around inside the factory, inside the building, and there was no stink. There was no black smoke. It was even really quiet. I actually was wondering if I was driving a hybrid. And they're like, no, this is our new clean diesel technology. And let me tell you, I was pretty darn impressed. But let's talk about what diesel really is. How is it different from regular gasoline, and how diesel engines are different, so you understand why it's important to never put gas into a diesel motor or put diesel fuel into a regular gasoline motor. Because let me tell you, it's bad. It's very, very bad. Theoretically, diesel and gasoline engines are similar. They're both internal combustion engines. And like I said, that those are designed to convert chemical energy of the fuel into the mechanical energy that moves your car down the road. The big difference is diesel engines don't have spark plugs. Remember, I told you that the job of the spark plug is to ignite the air-fuel mixture after it's been compressed to get that wonderful boom inside the engine that creates the power that pushes your piston down on the power stroke. Diesel engines don't have spark plugs. Diesel fuel is also a petroleum byproduct, just like gasoline. It's one of the many byproducts that are produced when a barrel of crude oil is processed and refined. But diesel fuel, it's heavier and it's less flammable. And what that means is diesel fuel can handle much higher compression before spontaneously igniting than regular gasoline can. So in a diesel engine, I mentioned on a gasoline engine that first stroke where the piston pulls down, it's sucking air and fuel into the combustion chamber. Well, in a diesel engine, you're only pulling in air. The fuel injectors do not squirt the fuel in at this point. They wait. So the diesel engine, it pulls air in, and then it compresses the air back up on that second compression stroke. And because it's just air, you can compress it a heck of a lot more. That air gets super hot. And then at the end of that compression, then the fuel injectors squirt the diesel fuel into that compressed air. And when they meet, the air is hot enough to ignite the fuel on its own. You don't need a spark plug. So diesel takes advantage of spontaneous combustion, but it's still timed with when that fuel gets squirted into the chamber with that super heated compressed air, and you get a fantastic boom, lots of power. And that's why diesel engines can be so powerful. They can have a lot of torque. That's why diesels are used in those big trucks that need to haul things or tow things. Diesel engines are great for that. So that is how diesel engines are mainly different from your gasoline engine. So what happens then if you put gasoline into a diesel engine? It's not good because the diesel engine is so much higher compression. I said that gasoline, especially the lower octane, it can't handle that compression. Even the premium gasoline cannot handle the compression of a diesel engine. So it's going to just start knocking right away, it's just not going to work at all. So the situation is that I've had one of my neighbors he owns a landscaping company, and he had one of his employees. And unfortunately, this happens because when you have employees driving your work vehicles, and sometimes they're just not thinking or they're new to it, if they're in charge of putting gas in the vehicle, this happens. They accidentally just, put regular gas in it because that's what they're used to doing with their own cars. And you end up with regular gasoline in your diesel engine. And aside from being fuel, diesel also acts as a lubricant for a lot of the parts inside the diesel engine, particularly the fuel injector pumps. So if you put regular gasoline in there, you're going to get all sorts of knocking and misfiring, but you're also going to be starving that engine of lubrication. So there's a lot of damage that occurs. And unfortunately, my friend who owns the landscaping company, he had to pay several $1,000s to fix the engine after his employee made a mistake. So you never, ever want to put gasoline into a diesel motor. But you don't want to put diesel fuel into a gasoline motor either, because the gasoline engines, they can't even combust the diesel fuel. So the car will just stop. The spark plug will fire off and literally nothing will happen. There will be no power made typically. And so your car will just stop, and you're going to have to get it towed over to the mechanic shop, and the mechanic is going to have to take everything apart. They're going to have to drain out all the diesel fuel, clean everything out, clean out the fuel injectors. Hopefully there was no permanent damage to the fuel injectors. Often there is, and they have to be replaced. You have to flush out all the lines. It's a really nasty, messy process, and your mechanic will hate you for it. And it will also cost you typically at least $1,000 just because of the amount of labor involved to do that. And that's assuming you didn't permanently damage any of the engine parts. So that is why you got to be really careful not to put diesel fuel into your regular car's engine. It really shouldn't be that big of a problem because the diesel pumps are a different color. Those pumps are typically green, and they tend to be slightly separated from the rest of the pumps, so that you really shouldn't get those confused. As I said, the situation where people accidentally put regular gas into a diesel motor, typically a work truck they're not used to refilling, that happens more often. But bottom line is, be careful, put the right type of fuel into your vehicle so that it lasts you a long time and it doesn't get damaged. So I hope you understand that with some of these myths, putting premium fuel into a car that takes regular is not going to increase your gas mileage. It's not going to give you better performance. All it is going to do is eat money that you didn't need to be spending. So if you're looking for ways to, get a little bit more power, or get better gas mileage and save money, because we're always trying to do that, here are a couple of really quick tips on how to maximize your gas mileage. Number one, make sure that your car is well maintained and that it is running at optimal efficiency. It's doing what it's supposed to be doing, what it's designed to do. If things get gummed up, your injectors aren't working. We've got one of our cars in our fleet that's driving my husband crazy because there is a misfire, and we have replaced basically half the car, and we're still not finding what the true problem is. And as a result, the car is misfiring occasionally, and he's not getting the power or the fuel efficiency that he should be getting. And, believe me, it's driving him absolutely crazy. So make sure your car is in optimal working order. That will maximize your gas mileage. Make sure that your tires are properly inflated with the right amount of air. If you don't have quite enough air in your tires, that means that more of the rubber is touching the road and you're dragging along the road. It increases friction. Increasing friction, it's like dragging your feet when you walk. It's harder to do. Your car is going to burn more gas to get you down the road. So keep those tire pressures properly inflated and just drive a little smarter. 55 miles an hour really is the optimal range of fuel efficiency for cars on the highway. that may be changing a little bit, and I haven't looked at the science behind the aerodynamics of cars today, but when the 55 mile per hour speed limit was put in, that wasn't just some random number that they pulled out of a hat. That was actually based on wind tunnel tests and other fancy engineering math that said this is really the optimal speed for fuel efficiency. Beyond that, your drag coefficients get too high and you start getting worse gas mileage. Technology has been getting better, but still pretty much between that 55 and 65 is your fuel economy. So, don't drive like a bat out of hell and you'll get better gas mileage. And drive smarter. Plan your trips more efficiently. UPS saved hundreds of millions of dollars per year on fuel costs alone simply by planning their routes better and only making right-hand turns, minimizing their idling. So plan, put all your errands together. Pick one afternoon that you're going to run all of your errands at the same time instead of making multiple trips during the week. That really will help you save a little bit on gas over time. And don't just do the jackrabbit starts when the light turns green. When it turns green, please do get up and go so you're not delaying everybody. But you don't have to do, hey, dude, watch this launch every time. In other words, don't drive like I do. You'll get much better gas mileage if you do not drive like I tend to drive. But it's always a decision of whether or not you want to have a little bit of fun or you want to save a little money on gas. But I always want you guys to know how to save as much money as possible. Another option is to stop driving. Take that bicycle, take that bus. There are more alternative transportation options in more and more cities now. And, that's better for our health sometimes too. A bicycle is good for your health. It's good for our environment and it's good for your wallet. Thanks so much for listening, folks. I hope this was helpful in dispelling some of the myths around the different types of gas and whether or not you'll get more power, you'll get better gas mileage. I want you to save money and I want you to be taking the best possible care of your car. Stay safe, everyone. Until next time. Bye-bye.
The Straight Shift podcast is copyright LeeAnn Shattuck, The Car Chick, 2017. All views expressed by guest and or co-hosts are those of the guest and or co-hosts, and not necessarily those of LeeAnn Shattuck or The Car Chick.